Welcome back to channel. What I'm about to share with you was considered so revolutionary that Joel Goldsmith hesitated for years before teaching it publicly. This single prayer technique has dissolved financial crises, healed broken relationships, and transformed lives in ways that seem impossible. But here's what most people don't understand about this method. It's not about asking for anything. It's not about pleading or bargaining with God. This prayer works by recognizing something that's already true, something that exists right now in this very moment. The students who discovered this technique often said the same thing. They felt a sudden shift in consciousness, like stepping out of a dream into reality. Problems that seemed insurmountable simply began dissolving without struggle or effort. Joel called this the prayer of recognition, and it works on a principle that revolutionizes everything you think you know about prayer. Instead of asking God to change your circumstances, you recognize that God's perfection is already present where the problem appears to be. Remember, this is a spiritual practice that works alongside, never replaces, professional care when you need it. This technique addresses the consciousness level where all problems originate, creating space for practical solutions to emerge naturally. Here's the exact technique. When facing any challenge, you simply declare with inner conviction these words: God's perfect solution is already here. I recognize divine order operating now. This situation is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. The power isn't in the words themselves. It's in the recognition that shifts your consciousness from seeing a problem to recognizing God's presence. This usually takes consistent practice over weeks or months to fully integrate. What makes this prayer so effective is that it stops the mental activity that keeps problems alive. Most people pray by describing their problems to God, unknowingly reinforcing the very conditions they want to change. This technique does the opposite. You're not trying to convince God of anything. You're aligning your consciousness with what's already true in spiritual reality. The moment you make this recognition, you step out of problem consciousness into solution consciousness. Students often ask me how long this takes to work. The consciousness shift can happen immediately, but the outer manifestation usually unfolds gradually. Some see changes within days. Others need weeks of consistent practice before breakthrough occurs. The key is persistence without desperation. You practice this recognition not because you need God to do something, but because you're training yourself to see what's already there. This is why Joel considered it the most powerful prayer ever revealed. Here's what Joel discovered through decades of spiritual healing work. Every problem exists only in human consciousness. In God's consciousness, which is the only real consciousness, perfection is eternally established and can never be disturbed or threatened. When you practice the prayer of recognition, you're not changing God's mind about your situation. You're changing your own consciousness to align with God's eternal perfection. This shift in perception allows divine solutions to manifest naturally. The beauty of this approach is its simplicity. You don't need special training or years of study. You just need the willingness to stop seeing problems and start recognizing God's presence. Even children can master this technique with remarkable results. This is the foundation that transformed thousands of lives through Joel's ministry. But understanding the technique is just the beginning. Let me share some remarkable stories of how this prayer has worked in real situations. Margaret, a single mother from Portland, discovered this prayer when facing eviction. She'd been unemployed for 3 months, and every job application seemed to lead nowhere. Desperation had become her constant companion, creating more anxiety and blocking opportunities. Instead of praying for a job, she began practicing the prayer of recognition daily. God's perfect provision is already here. I recognize divine order operating now. My financial needs are resolved in God's infinite wisdom. At first it felt strange, almost naive. But something shifted after 2 weeks of consistent practice. She stopped focusing on lack and started noticing possibilities. A conversation with her neighbor revealed a part-time opportunity she'd never considered. Within a month, this led to full-time employment. Margaret later said the most remarkable thing wasn't finding the job. It was how her consciousness had changed from desperate seeking to confident knowing. She'd learned to recognize God's provision even before it appeared in form. David, an accountant from Denver, used this prayer when his marriage seemed beyond repair. Years of accumulated resentment had created what felt like an unbridgeable gap between him and his wife. Traditional counseling had helped, but something deeper needed healing. He began applying the recognition prayer to their relationship. God's perfect love is already here. I recognize divine harmony operating now. This marriage is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. The practice required months of consistent application. The breakthrough came gradually. Instead of focusing on his wife's faults, David began recognizing the divine love that existed between them. His changed consciousness created space for genuine communication and renewed intimacy to emerge naturally. 6 months later, they celebrated their renewed marriage. David realized that the problem had never been their circumstances. It was his consciousness that needed transformation, and the prayer of recognition provided exactly that. Sarah, a business owner from Atlanta, faced bankruptcy after a major client canceled their contract. Years of building her consulting firm seemed to crumble overnight. Fear consumed her thoughts, making clear thinking nearly impossible for several weeks. A friend introduced her to Joel's teachings, and she began practicing the recognition prayer regarding her business crisis. God's perfect solution is already here. I recognize divine order operating now. This situation is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. The shift wasn't immediate. For the first month, doubt battled with faith. But gradually, her perspective changed from seeing disaster to recognizing opportunity. New clients appeared and innovative solutions emerged that she couldn't have imagined in her fearful state. Within 8 months, her business had not only recovered, but expanded beyond its previous size. Sarah learned that problems often contain the seeds of greater good, visible only through transformed consciousness. James, a teacher from Boston, struggled with chronic anxiety that had affected his work and relationships for years. Medical treatment helped manage symptoms, but the underlying mental patterns seemed unchanged despite various therapeutic approaches he tried. He discovered the prayer of recognition through Joel's writings and began applying it to his anxiety. God's perfect peace is already here. I recognize divine calm operating now. My mind is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. Progress came in waves over several months. The anxiety didn't disappear overnight, but something profound shifted in how he related to anxious thoughts. Instead of fighting them, he began recognizing the peace that existed beneath them. This recognition gradually dissolved the power anxiety held over his life. A year later, James described feeling like he'd awakened from a long nightmare. The recognition prayer had taught him to identify with his spiritual nature rather than his anxious thoughts, creating lasting transformation. If you're feeling inspired by these transformation stories, like this video to help others discover these powerful teachings. Subscribe to the channel for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and in the comments share what resonated most with you from these healing journeys. Now let me teach you Joel's second powerful technique that amplifies the prayer of recognition. He called it spiritual treatment, and it works by treating the false beliefs that create problems rather than treating the problems themselves directly. Here's how it works. Every problem has a corresponding false belief supporting it. Financial lack comes from believing in limitation. Relationship conflict comes from believing in separation. Health challenges come from believing in vulnerability rather than wholeness. Spiritual treatment involves recognizing these false beliefs and replacing them with spiritual truth. For financial challenges, you recognize abundance as God's nature. For relationship problems, you recognize love as the only reality. For health issues, you recognize perfection as your true identity. The process is simple but requires understanding. You identify the false belief, reject it consciously, then recognize the spiritual truth that replaces it. This combination with the prayer of recognition creates powerful transformation. Let me give you a specific example of spiritual treatment in action. When facing financial pressure, most people focus on getting money. But Joel taught that the real issue is consciousness of lack, not actual shortage of supply. The treatment begins with recognition. There is no lack in God. Therefore, there can be no real lack anywhere. I reject the belief in limitation as having no power over God's child. I recognize infinite abundance as my true inheritance available. Now, this isn't positive thinking or affirmation. It's recognizing what's spiritually true and allowing that truth to transform your consciousness. The changed consciousness then attracts circumstances that reflect this inner abundance rather than inner lack. Students who master this approach often report that money concerns simply fade away, not because they suddenly became wealthy, but because they'd learned to identify with their spiritual abundance rather than material appearances. Joel's third transformative technique addresses what he called the human effort trap. Most people try to solve problems through personal will and struggle, unknowingly blocking the very help they're seeking from infinite intelligence. The grace method involves stepping back from personal effort and allowing divine intelligence to provide solutions. This doesn't mean becoming passive, but rather becoming receptive to guidance that transcends human thinking and limitation. Here's how you practice it. When facing any challenge, after using the prayer of recognition, you add this powerful declaration: I step back from human effort. Divine intelligence is providing the perfect solution. I am open and receptive to guidance. Then you listen, not with your ears, but with your consciousness. Ideas will come, opportunities will appear, people will show up. The solutions that emerge through this receptive state are often more creative than anything human thinking could devise. The grace method transformed how Linda, a graphic designer from Seattle, approached her creative blocks. Instead of forcing inspiration, she learned to recognize that divine creativity was always available and seeking expression through her consciousness. When stuck on projects, instead of struggling, she would declare, I step back from human effort. Divine creativity is providing perfect inspiration. I am open and receptive to new ideas. Then she would wait in receptive silence. The results amazed her clients. Ideas flowed with unprecedented originality and effectiveness. Her business expanded naturally as word spread about her innovative designs. But more importantly, work became joyful rather than stressful. Linda discovered that divine intelligence has solutions available that human thinking cannot reach. The grace method taught her to access this unlimited creativity by stepping out of personal effort into spiritual receptivity. Now, let's address the most common obstacle students face when learning these techniques. The logical mind rebels against recognizing perfection while experiencing problems. This mental resistance can block the very transformation you're seeking. Joel taught that doubt is actually a form of prayer. When you doubt that divine perfection is present, you're unconsciously praying for problems to continue. The key is learning to doubt your doubts rather than doubting the truth. Here's the technique for handling resistance. When doubt arises, don't fight it. Instead, recognize it as impersonal mental activity with no power over spiritual truth. Then return to your recognition prayer with renewed understanding. This process usually takes several weeks to establish. Be patient with yourself. Every spiritual master has faced the same mental resistance. The difference between success and failure is persistence in recognizing truth despite temporary appearances. Another challenge students encounter is expecting immediate outer results. The prayer of recognition works first at the consciousness level, then manifests gradually in outer experience. Understanding this prevents discouragement during the transformation process. Think of consciousness like soil and problems like weeds. The recognition prayer changes the soil, making it impossible for problem weeds to grow, but existing weeds may take time to wither as the soil transformation takes hold. This is why Joel emphasized consistent daily practice rather than crisis-only application. Regular recognition. Prayer keeps consciousness aligned with truth, preventing problems from taking root rather than just treating them after they appear. Students who understand this principle maintain their practice even when results aren't immediately visible. They know that consciousness transformation is occurring and outer manifestation will follow, according to divine timing and wisdom. Here's a practical obstacle many face: applying these techniques during emotional storms. When fear, anger, or grief overwhelm consciousness, recognition prayer can seem impossible or ineffective despite your best efforts. Joel's solution was what he called the stepping stone technique. Instead of trying to leap from emotional chaos directly to recognition of perfection, you take intermediate steps that gradually elevate consciousness to a receptive state. Start by recognizing that the emotion isn't your true identity. I am not this fear. I am not this anger. I am not this grief. These are temporary experiences passing through consciousness, but they are not who I am. Then recognize what you are. I am God's beloved child, eternally safe and loved. From this elevated consciousness, the prayer of recognition becomes natural and effective, creating genuine transformation rather than spiritual bypassing. The final common challenge is applying these techniques to chronic or recurring problems. Some students worry that if the recognition prayer really worked, Problems would never return once they'd been treated spiritually. Joel explained that recurring problems indicate consciousness patterns that need deeper transformation. Each time you apply recognition prayer to the same issue, you're working at progressively deeper levels of consciousness, creating more permanent change. Think of it like physical exercise. One workout doesn't create permanent fitness. Regular practice develops strength that eventually becomes effortless and natural. Spiritual practice works the same way, building consciousness strength through consistent application. The key is viewing recurring challenges as opportunities for deeper spiritual development rather than evidence of failure. Each application of recognition, prayer strengthens your ability to identify with spiritual truth rather than human appearances. If these techniques for overcoming challenges are speaking to your heart, like this video to support this content, subscribe to the channel. For more advanced spiritual practices, and in the comments write which obstacle are you most ready to transform using these principles. Now let me share Joel's most advanced technique for those ready to deepen their practice. He called it Christ consciousness recognition, and it goes beyond solving individual problems to establishing permanent identification with your spiritual nature. This technique recognizes that the Christ consciousness that Jesus demonstrated is actually the true identity of every person. Not Jesus the man, but the divine consciousness that expressed through him and seeks to express through you. Here's the practice. In meditation or quiet moments, recognize the same Christ consciousness that Jesus expressed is my true identity right now. I am the beloved child in whom God is well pleased. Divine love, wisdom, and power expressed naturally through me. This isn't claiming to be Jesus, but recognizing the same divine nature he revealed. As this recognition deepens through daily practice, you begin living from Christ consciousness rather than human personality, transforming everything automatically. When Michael, a therapist from Phoenix, began practicing Christ consciousness recognition, his entire approach to helping clients transformed. Instead of seeing people as broken and needing fixing, he began recognizing their inherent divine wholeness. This shift in perception created remarkable healing in his practice. Clients responded to his recognition of their true spiritual nature, often achieving breakthroughs more quickly than traditional methods had produced in his previous years of work. Michael learned to hold people in the truth of their spiritual identity while compassionately addressing their human experiences. This combination created space for genuine transformation rather than just symptom management or coping strategies. His practice expanded naturally as word spread about his unique approach. But more importantly, Michael discovered his own calling to be a transparency for divine love, making his work deeply fulfilling rather than emotionally draining. Christ consciousness recognition also transforms how you handle daily challenges and interactions. Instead of reacting from personality patterns, you respond from your spiritual center, bringing divine qualities into every situation automatically. When someone is angry or difficult, instead of taking it personally, you recognize this person as God's beloved child, expressing imperfectly right now. I see through their behavior to their true spiritual nature and respond from love rather than reaction. This practice doesn't make you passive or naive. It gives you access to divine wisdom and strength that human personality cannot provide. You become more effective in handling difficulties because you're operating from unlimited spiritual resources. The transformation in relationships is often dramatic. People respond to the love and wisdom you express from Christ consciousness, even when they can't explain why they feel different around you. After your practice deepens, Joel's final technique addresses manifestation from the highest spiritual level. Instead of trying to attract specific things, you recognize divine design is already established for your life, containing everything needed for your complete fulfillment. Here's how divine design recognition works. You acknowledge that infinite intelligence has already designed your perfect life expression, including all necessary supply, relationships, opportunities, and experiences. Your role is recognition, not creation. The practice involves declaring, divine intelligence has designed my perfect life. Everything I need is already included in this divine design. I recognize and accept God's will for me, knowing it exceeds my human wishes and imagination. This technique eliminates struggle around manifestation. Instead of trying to force outcomes, you become receptive to divine design unfolding naturally. The results often surprise you with their perfection and timing, beyond human planning. Rebecca, an artist from Nashville, discovered divine design recognition during a career crisis. Her artwork wasn't selling, and financial pressure tempted her to abandon her, calling for more practical employment that wouldn't fulfill her soul. Instead of forcing career decisions, she began recognizing, divine intelligence has designed my perfect creative expression. All necessary support and opportunities are included in this design. I trust and accept God's plan for my artistic fulfillment. Within months, unexpected opportunities emerged. A gallery owner discovered her work through an unlikely connection. Corporate clients began commissioning pieces. Her income from art eventually exceeded what practical jobs would have provided. Rebecca learned that divine design is always more generous and creative than human planning. By trusting this design instead of forcing her own ideas, she discovered fulfillment she never imagined possible. Integration is the final key to mastering Joel's teachings. These techniques aren't separate practices, but aspects of one unified understanding. Your true identity is spiritual, and all problems exist only in the illusion of separation from this truth. The prayer of recognition, spiritual treatment, the grace method, Christ consciousness, and divine design, recognition all serve one purpose. They help you remember who you really are and live from that remembrance consistently. Daily practice becomes not just problem solving but identity establishment. Each time you choose recognition over reaction, truth over appearance, you strengthen your ability to live as the spiritual being you truly are. This is Joel's ultimate gift to humanity. Not just techniques for healing problems, but a complete way of living from spiritual consciousness that makes problems increasingly irrelevant to your experience. Here's your daily practice for integrating everything you've learned. Begin each morning with 5 minutes of Christ consciousness recognition, establishing your spiritual identity as the foundation for the day ahead. When challenges arise, apply the prayer of recognition immediately. God's perfect solution is already here. I recognize divine order operating now. This situation is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. Don't wait for problems to grow larger. Use spiritual treatment for persistent challenges, identifying and rejecting false beliefs while recognizing spiritual truth. Apply the grace method when human effort reaches its limits, becoming receptive to divine solutions. End each day by recognizing divine design in everything that occurred. This practice transforms even difficulties into spiritual opportunities, maintaining the consciousness that attracts continued good into your experience. You now possess the same spiritual tools that transformed thousands of lives through Joel Goldsmith's ministry. But tools are only as powerful as your commitment to using them consistently and faithfully. Remember, these aren't emergency techniques for crisis moments only. They're a complete approach to living from your true spiritual nature. Daily practice creates the consciousness that prevents problems rather than just healing them after they appear. The prayer of recognition that seemed so simple when we began is actually the most revolutionary spiritual technique ever revealed. It transforms you from someone who has problems into someone who recognizes solutions from victim to victor. Your spiritual journey accelerates from this moment forward. Every time you choose recognition over reaction, you're building the consciousness that makes miracles natural and problems impossible. This is your inheritance as God's beloved child. If you feel your spiritual understanding has expanded after discovering these Joel Goldsmith secrets like this video, subscribe to the channel, because I have more transformative teachings waiting for you. And in the comments, write I am transformed to confirm your commitment to this new spiritual path. Thanks for watching.